So now I have the real privilege of introducing our speakers for the day. We're so fortunate to have Patty, Kwame, and Jamie with us. Patty Bennett is an empowerment coach, an award-winning entrepreneur. She's an international motivational speaker and also the founder and CEO of Cardia Connection. You can check out her full bio in the chat, as well as a link to her website. We also have Kwame Adobe Herrera. He's an anti-trafficking advocate, consultant, and speaker, and that's in addition to the role that he plays as a public school educator. And in addition to his impressive, oh no, I said that already. He's a public school teacher. I wanted to make sure I highlighted that, Kwame, especially given the context that we're all living in, just special appreciation for the work you're doing with the kiddos. And Jamie Johnson is a lived experience expert and CEO and founder of Sisters of the Streets, a lived experience-based organization that believes exploitation is not just an issue for those involved, but it's an epidemic of humanity. I really like that. So all of their bios are in the chat for you to read their extensive and impressive experience. Thank you all so much for spending some of your Thursday with us. We really appreciate it. I just want to add two quick acknowledgements before we jump into the content. One is that you may hear a variety of terms used throughout the discussion, including survivor, person with lived experience expert, and others, and that it's really important in all of our work to ask the people that we're working with and engaging with what it is that they prefer and how it is that they identify when we address them. The second thing is just to acknowledge that our speakers and all survivors are more than their stories, and they engage in the world in a variety of ways, including but not exclusively in the anti-trafficking space. So I really just want to appreciate our speakers here today who have taken time out to share their perspectives with us. So let's get into it. These are our learning objectives today. You will gain insights into engagement approaches with survivors of labor trafficking. You will increase your understanding of labor trafficking survivors' needs, and you will become better equipped to facilitate survivors' healing and wellness. So to kick things off, I really want to begin by digging in a little bit to the engagement piece and share something that you said, Jamie, in one of our previous discussions here. So you said this, you said, yes, we need jobs and housing and resources, but first we need an environment where people can engage with those who have been traumatized. That means service providers doing the work they're expecting others to do. That means healing ourselves. That's powerful stuff. I wonder if you could speak to this quote and about the kind of culture shift you think that we need in our approach to service delivery.
Sure. Good afternoon or morning to everybody, wherever you are in the world. I'm excited to be here, and my perspective on this quote is my approach to whatever the topic at hand is. We could be talking about housing insecurity, we could be talking about labor trafficking, we could be talking about human trafficking as a whole, we could be talking about domestic violence, we could be talking about anything that society is plagued by. And my approach is always going to be the same thing, humanity. And I think that what we have lost within our service provision, within our everyday approach to interaction and communication with one another is lack of humanity, lack of empathy and compassion, not sympathy, but empathy. And so when we are stepping into a place of service provision, we have to ask ourselves, have I first been willing to do everything that I'm asking of the person or the demographic that I'm trying to support? Have I done that in my own life? Because we're not separate from our jobs. So how we do one thing is how we do everything. And we can't separate and take off one hat and put on another if we are involved within something that has people's lives at stake. We have to be the same person we are in our work environments, in our resource environments, as we are at home. And so if we are not that person, we need to kind of check ourselves at the door and say, am I doing the work that I am trying to support others doing the work in for their own healing? Because if we're not, then our efforts are going to be ineffective ultimately.
I love that as sort of a framework to begin the conversation here, and a reminder to service providers about the importance of showing up as our whole authentic selves, and that it's just as important to take care of ourselves. Thank you so much for sharing that. I thought it was such a powerful quote. I'll invite, both Kwame and Patty to interject if you have additional thoughts on any of these questions. Did you have anything to share?
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for opening the opportunity for us to be here. I'll reinforce, I guess, the as a service provider to really take care of ourselves first, so we can have our cups full and avoid, the burnout and the vicarious trauma that can come with servicing um, our population. And I think that that is highly important, because if we're in a good place, we can better be present to hear the needs of the person that we're helping.
Absolutely. Thanks, Patty. I want to share a quote, a really powerful quote that Kwame had shared during our discussions earlier. Kwame, you said, "I didn't want to be known as a Black man from a different country, and on top of that, be labeled a trafficking survivor." Um, Thinking about labels and some of the things that are sort of the invisible insecurities that you had in your head, I wonder if you can say a little bit more about this quote, and also share if there was anything that service providers could have said or done to create a space in which you felt safe in.
Yes, that's a beautiful question.
I think we might be having a little service interruption from Kwame.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Your screen's frozen, but we can hear you.
Okay, perfect.
There
Okay.
you are.
Yeah. Uh, this is this school right here. Something.
Kwame, we're still getting we're still getting a broken
like
connection from you, Kwame. I wonder if you turn your
knowing who
camera off.
I am, what I'm from.
I'm not sure if he can hear me. Hey, Kwame, I might suggest that you turn your camera off. That might improve the connection quality. If you can hear me. Let me go on while we wait for Kwame to reconnect. Hopefully he can come back to us, because I really want to dig into this idea. I want to share something that you said with us, Patty, about trauma not being something that needs to be measured. And the whole idea of trauma-informed care is one that everyone that's participating in this training is familiar with. I think where we get lost sometimes is remembering all of the applications of trauma-informed care. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about what you meant when you said this to us, and what trauma-informed care looks like to you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's important to me, many levels, professionally and my lived experience, because human trafficking can look in so many different ways. And it's important that we as a person and we as service providers go into a situation not wanting to measure the amount of trauma that the person has been through. And what I meant by that is avoid the judgment and avoid the that feeling that you want to know how much of the trauma that person has been through in order to provide the service. That's super important to me, and I believe it's super important to service providers too, because if we go into any service that we are providing anywhere and we're just talking to the person as a person and having compassion and empathy, we can better hear what their needs are and hear how we can service them, instead of trying to hear what amount of trauma and what amount of experience that person went through, because many survivors go through different things. Some experience physical abuse, some experience psychological abuse, some experience all types of abuse, we don't know what that is, and we don't really need to know in order to help that person. We just need to look at them as a person and have compassion and empathy for them.
It's an important reminder. Jamie, or I think Kwame might have joined us again. Kwame, can you hear us? Looks like he's called in. I just want to invite Jamie and Kwame to weigh in on that. Your
Yes, I'm
perspective
here.
on. Welcome back, Kwame. Just wondering
Thank you very
about
much.
your perspectives on trauma-informed care, what that looks like in practice, what that's meant to you.
Yes, thank you. Trauma-informed care is a topic that, you know, I struggle with a lot because we use it in all sort of different settings nowadays, and to me, it starts to feel like it's being watered down in a sense. We ever look at what really the trauma is that a person is facing, as a, you know, when service provider keep using the word trauma-informed care in their languages and stuff like that, it tends to feel like they are just putting it as a label, as they're just using it so they can, you know, impress others by saying they are trauma informed. And to me, that's not reality I have come across. That's not what I have seen. That's not what I have lived with. I still to this day wonder, I haven't received any trauma informed care from any service provider since I've been out of my my traffickers hand since about 6 years ago. I know to this day, so I haven't seen any trauma-informed care given to me. So to me, I feel like we overuse that word, and we need to look back and take a look back at that word again and say, who are we really providing this service to? How are the traumas different from this person, that person, that person? So if each person struggle with different trauma, okay, the way they deal with that, we need to revisit our checklist and say, okay, this checklist is good, but can we dive deeper into servicing this person to as a whole, not just checking off things on our list. So to me, we need to revisit that trauma-informed language and to look at our trainees and say, we need to tell this to individual person, not to a whole group of people. We want it to be individualized when we are providing service for somebody who have gone through such a heinous crime, such a pain, that we need to direct it toward that one person. Checklists are good, but we need to be able to also make sure that we are healing that person, we are providing that service to that person that needed it at that one moment. So yes, that's what it means to me.
Can I ask a follow-up question, and maybe Jamie, you can weigh in on this? One of the things I know as a former service provider, we've been taught is to really try and balance the knowledge of the trauma and the trafficking experience with the idea that our job is not to know your full story or the full trauma history. Our job is to understand, who's sitting in front of us today and what you need and how we can help you achieve your goals as you define them. And so we're often taught not to get into the trauma piece, often because, case managers are not necessarily, and often cases are not clinicians. And so we're cautioned against, going too deeply into that. So I wonder what you would say to service providers who are not clinicians about how to navigate that. How much is important for you, for them to know about your experience in order for them to deliver quality services to you?
I like to use personal perspective, because I've been on both sides as well. I do have lived experience, but I've also been in peer support or been in a case management position. And when I ask myself those questions, sometimes I flip it on myself and I'm just like, how much do I need to tell this person about my traumas and my life or my own healing for them to be able to build a healthy relationship with me? And so obviously the person receiving the services isn't in a position where they are supposed to be providing services to the case manager or the peer support. But I think if we flip those scenarios in our head to say, take out our label of what we are. We're a case manager, or we're a peer support, or we are the therapist, or whatever the case is. If we first have the foundation of, I want to have a healthy relationship with this person and this individual, then it's kind of a little bit easier to navigate how much exactly do I need to know about the details of this person's trauma versus how much do I need to understand the emotion that's behind the trauma. And really, that's where we really connect as human beings, is the emotion that, you know, we could go through the same, two of us could go through child abuse at the same age by the same parent, and we are going to perceive and receive and process that trauma completely different. So it's not necessarily the act that's important. It's not important if we were labor trafficked or sex trafficked or organ trafficked, or we were forced to marry, or whatever the case is. What's important is the emotion and the understanding of how do I navigate that in a healthy way. And so for me, I always like to try to flip the scenario on myself and just and do it that way when I'm in a provider, with my provider hat on, I guess. And I know I said can't leave hats at the door, switch hats. So that wasn't a very good analogy, but you guys know what I mean, I think. I would hope.
We got you, Jamie.
Important. That's so important, Jamie. If I may share, in my experience, I did go to so many places to get service, and it caused more damage than good because of, I would say, that re-traumatization, that digging for what's wrong with you, that caused much more damage than good. The example, the people that were able to help me were the ones that again looked at me as a person. I can't say this enough, and not looking at what was happening, like the trauma, right? The situation that I was in. They just looked at me in the eye. I could feel that compassion. I could feel that they were respecting me as a human being, and they just took it from there. And it took time, and they were willing to take the time to be with me, to build that relationship. And that's when I could trust them. And the most healing I had was because of that experience. Was that one person that didn't even know what happened. And another point is that I didn't even know what just happened. I was still figuring that out. So just the fact that the service provider was just looking at me, respecting me where I was, is when I could trust and start my healing process.
I'm hearing you all echo something that a colleague of mine, Amy Fleischauer at the International Institute of Buffalo, says all the time, which is that engagement is the work, right? The service plan and connecting with resources and knowing your rights, that's all really, really important, but it starts with developing that connection and trust with folks, and engaging with them human to human. That's the powerful stuff that fosters the rest of it.
Yeah, Megan, you said something that's exactly what I was gonna say. You know, it's about that first initial connection, that human to human feeling. We all have a longing for each other, and that is the piece that, when it comes to providing service to somebody, that would be something we throw out the window, and we need to bring that back. Say, okay, so you are here, I'm here. How can I help you? Start with that initial. That connection. Find something you both like. Just start with something small. Because I remember I struggle. I struggle with that. Like, I didn't want people to know who I am. You know. So I look forward to just not going to any of these services because it just makes me feel more trauma. Like, I feel more trauma by going. So what I need is that human to human interaction where I can feel like I'm, as a whole, I feel value. I feel like, okay, what I went through is not something, and I don't want you to feel some sort of sorry for me. I just wanted you to see me as a person. And so that initial contact, that start building that relationship, that building that connection is a huge when it comes to providing service for a survivor. So that's something I wanted to just share before we move on.
That's beautiful.
I just want to add too that I think when we think of trauma informed, you know, routing to that specific term, I think that we overthink that terminology a lot. We focus on the word trauma. And so when we think of trauma, we think of negative, right? So we think of all the horrible things that have happened to this person. And first and foremost, in order to understand and be trauma informed, we have to understand trauma and not understand what only causes trauma, but also the results of trauma. And understanding that is going to be a lifelong lesson because that adapts with each individual. And I think that we also need to focus on trauma is something that impacts us usually in a harmful way or a negative way, but to be trauma informed is to flip that. We're not focusing, trauma informed is not focusing on the trauma. Trauma informed is focusing on how do I turn this trauma into an empowerment? And you don't need to know the trauma to empower. You just need to know this person's skill sets, which you can recognize by doing everything that everyone is mentioning, building that rapport, building that relationship, getting to know that person for who they are in that moment, not yesterday, not 2 weeks ago, not a week ago, when those things naturally come up in the need to progress forward because, oh, this trigger is coming up for me. Now I need to understand where this trigger is coming from. Then we can dive deeper into that. But to fully focus every day, all day on your trauma, that's traumatizing. So that's not trauma informed. And so trauma informed to me is really figuring out how to recognize the skills and the survival mechanisms that can then be turned into transferable skills that are empowering for that individual. So I think we need to reframe, reframe. That was not intentional, guys. That was totally off the head. I think that we need to reframe how we are approaching what trauma-informed means. And trauma-informed to me is empowering, because empowerment then means the ultimate goal is self-sufficiency, right? The ultimate goal is healing. And so we can't get there if we're focused on the negative. So trauma-informed doesn't mean enabling, doesn't mean having pity. As Kwame said, nobody wants to be that spotlight guinea pig where it's like, oh my gosh, your life has been so horrible, I'm so sorry. That doesn't make you feel good. That makes you want to curl up and go back into your state of self-defense, and that's never going to help you, I guess, break out of that shell and then be able to move forward, because everyone around you so focused on what your trauma was instead of what your survival through the trauma can now empower in your new life, a new walk of healing.
Yes.
Well done.
So good.
Kudos from your fellow panelists. And what a good reminder to everyone to lean on that strengths-based approach, and also a reminder that our learning about trauma-informed care is an ongoing process. It's not a matter of you take a trauma-informed care training once and then you're done. It's constant to make sure that that's at the forefront of your mind and you're constantly growing in that space. Kwame, I want to revisit that quote that you shared with us so we can dig into that. I don't think we got anything that you said the first time. So start from scratch and tell us a little bit. This seems like such a big example of the kind of barriers that many survivors experience. And often it's hidden from view. These are the things that are, in your mind very loud, but it's not something that's necessarily evident to others in front of you. So talk a little bit about what you meant by this, and any other barriers you can think of that service providers should know.
Absolutely. Just before I get started, I have an accent, just let you guys know. I'm sure you hear that. I'm sorry. I still struggle with this every day of my life. There was a point in my life where I thought I'm gonna get the help I needed, and people won't, and I couldn't get there, and that was just taken away from me due to the fact that we focus so much on female-centered services, and there isn't a whole lot for men out there who are being victimized, who are being going through this trauma and going through this horrible, heinous crimes, and there are not place for them to go to where they can get the service they need. We have a lot, that's a problem that we face nationally wise and global wise, and it just isn't center for men to go to so they can feel welcome, because we have this stigma going around that it's all about, trafficking is all is only pertain to women's and it's on female. No, men's they do go through it too, and I am one of them, and there's more of us. We don't we don't want to be known. We don't want to put the label on us, because then for us we feel limited to what we can do. It restricts the power from us, and we feel like we're just not getting what we need. As a Black man from different country, I couldn't get the service I want. People look at me and say, well, he has an accent, he doesn't need what, we can't help him. And I said, okay, that's not okay. I need help. Can you please help me? But it just, to this point, I still haven't got the help I need. I was placed in, I went through different groups that doesn't want to help me. And it just, to this day, I don't know how to talk about that issue, because it hurts me so much knowing that I'm from a different country and I have the accent and I didn't have the proper documentation. It wasn't my fault that I was brought here to be used as a slave or to work, to be labor. It wasn't my fault. All I know is I was a minor and I needed help. I needed a family, I needed a place to stay. And to this day, I still think about the traumatization I went through with many service providers. Some of the barriers like I was mentioning is the language barrier, the fear of government, deportation. That's another reason why I don't want people to know who I am, because I don't want to be deported. And just knowing that there isn't a whole lot of places for me to go. When I was rescued, I was placed in juvenile delinquency home. Okay, I'm not a troublemaker. I'm not somebody who's gonna go stealing. All I need is a place to stay. Yeah, there was no home for me to go. There wasn't a place for me to go to. I was just placed with juvenile delinquency for a year and a half, where I was with I don't have anything against them, but it's just that I wasn't meant to be there. That's not where I needed to be at. I needed to be at a place where I needed to be taken care of, not with juvenile delinquency home that are helping the kids back to society. I just want to be a place where I can feel safe. And so to me, I feel like I'm going back to my perpetrator, because I had a home. I have a roof over me, I can eat, and I can, so I felt like I need to go back, but I didn't do it. Thank God. I'm glad I didn't go back. I stick to it for a year and a half in this juvenile delinquency household placement where I was put in. So things like that are scary to somebody who is from foreigner, someone who's Black, someone who's a man, identifying or trying to say they are a victim of trafficking. It is very hard to do so. Very, very hard. And the fact that I'm right here and now sharing this with you guys shows that we are making progress and we are moving forward. To me, myself, I felt this is a healing for me. Be able to talk about this every day and share this with others, knowing the pain I've went through and the pain I continue to go through, shows that I'm healing, and I will save at least one life, or whatever we share here today. You guys will put into good use and start to think about how do you provide for those who are foreigners, who have a language barrier, who have fear of a deportation. How are we going to deal with them? How are we going to help them out? And the goal is show that you are there for them. That's all we need. That's all I ever want, is to tell me that you will help me. Tell me that you will be there for me when I need it. When I'm having my PTSD, tell me you will be there to help me. When I'm feeling like cutting myself, tell me you'll be there for me. When I feel like taking my own life, tell me you'll be there for me. That's all I ever wanted. And to this day, I haven't got that from any service provider, and I'm going through myself. I'm fighting through it, continue to fight and fight and fight. And that's the fight I'm gonna continue to fight for until we put an end to this heinous crime that's happening in our country and other countries and all over the world right now. We need to work together. So that's that code. That's what it means to me. That's why I share that code with you.
I want to thank you so much, Kwame, for, I feel like you've just it's open for us. And one thing in particular that I want to pull out for folks is that as I'm hearing this experience, and again, I'm to your point, Jamie, I'm putting on my service provider hat for a second, even though that's always with me. I'm thinking about the tendency perhaps to think, how awful. And also, I would never do that. My program would never do that. My organization would never do that. And yet we do in ways that we don't do intentionally. It's when we see someone come through the door who looks differently than us, or who speaks a language that like we can't figure out how to get interpretation for, or there are many barriers to serving people who are different than you. And so often we say there's somebody better to do it, or I'm so sorry, we can't enroll you in our program. And it's not a slammed door in your face, right? It's much more subtle than that. It can be much more subtle, even if it's well-intentioned. And so I just want to highlight that for the folks that are part of this training, to really challenge yourselves and consider, historically, what have some of those instances perhaps been in your practice where you've had to turn someone away, you couldn't meet all of their needs, or you thought, my caseload is so big and this is a hard to serve case, and like what was their experience, and how can you really address that at the organizational level to make sure you have what you need to serve everybody equally. It's not perfectly articulated, but I felt like it was important to highlight that, because your experience, Kwame, unfortunately is not that unique. I think a lot of people share in that, so I just want to thank you for highlighting that really important piece for us.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you.
Can I touch on just one thing, just something? Kwame, thank you for just bringing I think we can go and we could sit on a million panels, right? Like we can go and we can go to a million webinars and we can learn facts and we can learn stats and we can learn all of these things. But I think always it never fails 100% of the time when you just are genuine with your experience on both sides, as a provider, as a lived experience expert. When you're genuine and authentic from your heart, that's always the webinar or the conference or the speaker or whatever that you walk away that what you were impacted by. So I just want to say thank you, Kwame, for sharing that very important. I have so many male identify as male survivor brothers that I can't even imagine, because I have, even within the survivor community, as somebody trying to receive resources, I have a certain set of privileges because of how I look, how I was born, how I identify. And that in itself is out of my control. But what is in my control is empowering the voices of those walking along with me in this journey, and understanding that there is systemic oppression and racism within the resources that are provided, unfortunately. And so, Megan, I appreciate your commentary for us to not have to point each other out, but to really dig within ourselves to understand that our biases, that whether they are inherent or they are learned or whatever they are, those biases impact how we provide services, regardless of what the provision or the clientele is or the demographic is. Those things that we go to work with, that impacts how we talk to people. That impacts how much time we're willing to give that person. That impacts how in detail we go into their case plan. That impacts those things. The way that we allow media and entertainment to infiltrate our mind and our biases and our prejudice, and the way that we walk our everyday to allow or not speak up about systemic injustices, about the worldly issues that we all face. Complacency is compliancy in a lot of ways, and that's no different in the resource world. And it is our job as individuals to step up and not be the voice for people. They always say, I want to be a voice for the voiceless. I hate that terminology, because you don't have to be the voice for anybody. You just get to pass the mic to those that have voices and empower them to be able to say exactly what they need, because we are the experts on our lives and we know what we need. We just sometimes need some support to navigate that. And so those thoughts were kind of all over the place, but you just really touched my heart with what you shared, Kwame. And I hope that this can be an avenue to open up for all of us. We all look so different, right? But we all share an experience that we are trying to heal from. And so I think that we have to first be real about sorry, my kid's head just popped into there. We have to be real about what the organizations we're representing and being okay with, are we okay with their policies and procedures? Are we okay with how the people making these policies and procedures view certain groups of people, view certain individuals? Are we okay with that? And if we're not, we need to put humanity over a paycheck sometimes, and we need to be the change in all ways, not just from 9 to 5 when we clock in and then go home and be everything that's feeding into that injustice. So I'm going to be quiet now, but thank you for your share.
Thank you. Thank you. That was beautiful.
We never want you to be quiet.
You know, if you haven't been able to catch the chat, there's so much gratitude and honor and positive emotion coming from the chat for you and for the rest of the panelists for sharing and for being here.
Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate all your thoughts. Thank you.
I don't want to shift gears, but I do want to shift gears to talk about the concrete needs. We've been talking a lot about the connection piece and the how of the service delivery. Now I want to shift a little bit to the what. So you all put this list together. It's not a comprehensive or complete list, but it's a really good starting point as we think about what are the needs of labor trafficking survivors, both the tangible needs and the intangible needs. And so maybe Patty, let's start with you. Can you touch on some of these for us? What did you need most? Is there anything you'd like to add to this list or elaborate on?
I can elaborate from this list based on my personal experience and following Kwame. Thank you so much for pouring your heart here. And I hope this was an opportunity as well for service providers to identify his strengths. And thank you so much for sharing. And I'll build upon that. I'm also an immigrant. And I experienced similar things, that I do have an accent as well. My experience has happened a little bit longer ago, but I too came in here, and it is emotional, like it was for you. But just the amount of things that I heard from service providers, that it was really degrading. And I would encourage not to use things like that, that I've heard. And I've heard from service providers too, when I was on the other side, which was even more painful to see that even though it's been so many years that it happened to me, it continued to happen today. And some of those things were like, you're an immigrant, if you shouldn't have been here to begin with. If, go back to your country and you will find services there. That's one example. Some other things that happened was people would come to our agency and they were told, well, you're an adult and you can make different choices, especially since it was related to labor trafficking. And they were told, you can just go back around and say no and say that you want to leave. And I experienced watching that. It was so heartbreaking to see still happening today. And it happens not just with immigration status, but it's happening here in the US. People that are born here and they're citizen here, and they're also treated in this way. I got to experience for myself, and I got to see people coming into the agency that I worked for. I no longer worked there for that reason of how many adults came in and they were turned away, and they were coming in for mental health support, and they were turned away because immigration status or because they were an adult. And I was literally told that, they were looking at their check, like Kwame shared a little bit about this earlier, at their check list, and on their checklist you're an adult, so you're able to make your own choices, so leave the situation that you are on your own. Or it's so hard to talk about this, But I wanted to mention some of that. I know it's probably not as eloquent as it could have been, but it's just still hard to remember how many times it happened that we're turned away. And also from my experience, the police was there, the SWAT team was there, the helicopters were there. It was a whole Hollywood show, if you will, and to arrest the perpetrators. And they left me there because I was an immigrant and I had no documents. And so I was still in the situation, unseen and unheard. And it's very hard. So that's some of the things I have to share.
Thank you, Patty. Those words are going to stick with us, I think. Feeling unseen and unheard are some of the worst feelings that humans can feel. I'm so sorry about that.
Thank you.
Megan, if you don't mind, I want to touch on some of these lists right here. One of the lists that I thought, just shine a light on it for some of the service providers that's on the call with us today. I remember I was in the I don't remember what they call them, but I think it's adult group or some sort of group, and we all got a token for transportation. Let me remind you, I'm a minor. I'm from a different country. I've never taken a train or taken a bus station. I've never done any of these things before. So I was given tokens from a service provider that I was working with or that I was in, giving me service, which I don't remember anything they did for me. But I remember this, they gave me tokens to go take the bus. And I look at it, I'm like, I have no idea what this is. This is tangible need. Yes, I need transportation. I need to get somewhere. And I know I'm a minor. I want to go to school. I still want to get education. That's why I'm here for. Okay, I want to get education. So they said, well, this is token. You can go ahead and use that and take a bus, and no training. There was no any form of education. There wasn't any form of guidance to how I should take the bus from point A to point B. It was nothing, and that is something that I just want to touch on and said, can we not continue doing that? Can we take a moment and just show that person some sort of compassion, some sort of mercy, and say, all right, this is how you use this. This is how things are done. Okay, help. Okay, that's all I can say to anyone who's on this call right now is that just be genuine with who you're working with. Be personable. Be friendly. Show them that you care. Okay, just give them what they need, or just tossing them whatever they ask for. It's not gonna build their self-esteem. It's not gonna build who they are. It's not gonna make them feel any better, because who knows how they're gonna use that stuff. For me, I still have those tokens to this day. I have them sitting with me as a reminder of the failure of service provider I was working with. A token, yes, I have it as a token now. It's a reminder for myself that how much I've been failed by those who I thought they would help me. So, and some of the things that are other intangible stuff like justice. I didn't get a justice I needed. I didn't know my rights when I was going to testify in a court. I wasn't getting my right. I didn't know what my rights were. Now we talk about victim bill of right. I didn't know what victim bill of right until recently that there's a victim bill of rights. Yeah, that stated that you have rights, and you have a right to resettlement, have a right to all sorts of different things. I already know that didn't exist. Nobody told me that. I just found out recently that bill exists. It's on the DOJ website. How am I supposed to know where that is at? And so this is so much that we need to do locally, state-wise, and also in our government, that we just need to work together, find a way to trickle things down, share data, help, just trying to find a way that things are aligned with each other. Each state is so different. They do things differently. I was going to college. I couldn't find resources that to help me go to college. I have I applied for different things and I never get the help I needed. Because I went from Michigan to Ohio. There's like, oh, that law is different, so Ohio is different too. And it's just like, how can we find a way to cooperate, do things synchronously, where that the laws that we have set up is helping each other, not just helping one state, or just where you are from. It just hurts so much just to see that it's so much difference when it comes to where you are, who you're working with, which service provider you are working with. It's just so much difference in the service that you needed. So I just want to say that please be genuine with who you are working with. Show them some sort of compassion, show them that you are there for them, that you are going to help them, not just somebody just want to help and check it off your list and go bye-bye. So anyway, that's something I want to share regarding this list.
I guess I'll just add, thank you both for what you already added. Patty, thanks for your just emotion as well and vulnerability. I guess foundationally, so when we see these needs, for me, it goes back to me for understanding and getting to know the individual, get to know the person, not the case, get to know the person, not the file. There's these intake forms and all these things, we all need our basic needs met, but basic needs are, we don't get out of something that is seemingly abusive to others. We don't get out of that just to step into more survival. We're trying to get out of that because we want to be able to live. We don't want to stay there. A life in survival is not a life. That's why it's called survival. We're literally just getting day to day, moment to moment. And so when we're thinking about tangible and intangible needs, again, you cannot do that with an individual if you don't get to know that person specifically, because what is needed for that individual, what is needed for transportation could be triggering for another person. If you think that it's just to get a vehicle for somebody, okay, great. Now you have transportation, but do I know that that person was in an extremely almost fatal car crash when they were 10 years old? Have I gotten to know that person? Again, not diving into that person's trauma, but you will get to know certain things because naturally with the relationship, people express certain things to you through your rapport building, not because you're sitting answering a bunch of questions, checking some boxes. And so giving a car to somebody might be helpful for that individual to get from point A to point B, but another individual may like to ride the bus, or may want a scooter, or may want a bike, or may want some running shoes to be able to walk because they like to get their steps in. You don't know until you know that individual, right? And we tend to think that we just have this one size fits all solution. And then we also don't think about, oh, well, got you your basic needs met, now you should be good. Like, hey, on your way out the door, like life's grand, right? No, there are things that come later. I could have a home. I had a home. I had a car. I had a job, and I lost everything because I had a PTSD attack, and I didn't know how to handle talking to my boss because there was no job etiquette approach training that was given to me. So now I've got all the things that I think that I need, right, to be successful, but I don't know how to manage those things. I don't know how to keep my house clean because I've been living in hotels for 7 years and people have been making my beds and folding my towels for me. And when I don't like something, I put it in the hallway, and I don't have to know how to stay organized. I don't have to know how to live amongst other people. I don't have to think about budgeting for car insurance because I'm taking Ubers everywhere. So there's all these things that if we don't get to know the individual as a person, get to know what that individual wants to do with their life, because it's not about what we think the individual should do with their life. It's about what that person wants to do. And as Megan had said earlier, coming alongside to provide to the best of our ability, how that to be a successful plan. And, sometimes service provision means allowing people to stay in the situations that we think they should get out of as well. Because we cannot drag people out of their current situations that they are surviving in to bring them into more traumatizing situations. So sometimes it's also about walking alongside. Yes, we can look from the outside and see that is a messed up situation. That person is clearly being abused. But if that person is not there yet and I don't have anything tangible or intangible to offer them that is of equal or greater value, then how dare I tell them that they need to change everything about their life and come with me and do everything that I tell them to do? Isn't that kind of similar to a trafficker, a mentality of a trafficker or an exploiter? To me, it is. And so if somebody doesn't care about my individual needs and then care enough to get to know me outside of the time they're clocked into their work, I'm not saying to overexert yourself and not get paid or compensated for the work that you do. What I am saying is bringing, once again, everything I say routes back to the empathetic, compassionate, humane heart, as everybody else has already been mentioning. Because if I care about what is happening to you, I care about what works best for you. And so that needs to happen in case planning. All of these things could be met and can fall all apart one day because I don't have the emotional balance to manage a trigger that comes to me even after all these things are provided to me. And so we have to get to know the individual, and we have to get to know what that person needs to be supported through their individual care plan.
You guys have left us with a lot of powerful things to think about, a to-do list that is manageable. I think some of the things are easier than others. Coordinating laws across states will take longer. There's a lot of stuff at the institutional level, at the program level, and certainly at the individual level, I think are immediately actionable coming away from this. We've spent a lot of time talking about the barriers and the challenges and the negative experiences. I wonder, as we approach the wrap up to the conversation, if there's any positive experience you guys have had with service providers you wanted to lift up as practices that you'd recommend. And more broadly than that, if you can speak to your journey towards healing, what has that looked like and who has been involved in that journey within and outside of the service provider space?
For me, the biggest help was from somebody that was not working in the anti-trafficking movement. They knew nothing about it, and they just took the time. They didn't have a degree. They didn't have a license. They just took the time to walk with me where I was at, and provide that. I got that emotional healing, that emotional support from a mentor. I call her a mentor because she just walked side by side with me. She didn't get paid for that. She was a volunteer at church. She just was willing to sit with me and not mention like, wow, that's a lot of trauma, or that's too much for me. She just always focused on the goodness that I had in my heart, and that some would say that made me vulnerable. She would speak to me that made me powerful. So just that empowerment, and her constantly spending the time with me to have me focus on my own strength, right? That's part of it too. It's not just the provider focusing on the survivor's strength, is teaching them also to focus on their own strength and their own, to empower themselves, and as they come out of that trauma bond experience and that PTSD, that complex trauma. And so this is the person that made the biggest impact in my life. Truly, I can say if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here today.
Wow. So that connection with just one person who saw and heard you was really powerful. I love that. Thank you, Patty.
Yeah.
You go?
Yeah, I will. That's a beautiful question. And I don't know if anyone is teacher in this audience right now, but if you're a teacher, I'm praising you, and I thank you for your hard working. You don't give, for all you do for us. I mean, for students, for all you do. Thank you. If you're a teacher in this audience, thank you for all you do. Yeah, my healing, my exodus start with my sixth grade teacher. Yeah, my exodus started with my sixth grade teacher. She saw me sitting with hoodies on, it's hot days, it's September, it's October, it is hot, it's beginning of school. And she saw me sitting by myself with a hoodie on And she said, gosh, something's wrong. She's a mother. She has 2 kids. It's intuition. She just knows something's wrong. And she reached out to me and said, how can I help you? That's all it takes. How can I help you? I was a small 6th grader sitting in a corner with a hoodie on, have no idea what was happening. And she just reached out. She just came up to me after, it was during recess time. And she says, hold on, let me talk to you for a second. It was a recess. She's like, hold on, let me talk to you for a second. I was sitting there and she came up to me and said, how can I help you? And I just break into tears. I mean, I was sobbing. I mean, that's all it takes. That's all it takes. That first initial contact is all it takes. And that's what she did. She took that leap of faith and come up to me and say, how can I help you? And to this day, not only she is my teacher, my mentor, she's my mother. I mean, I call her as my mother every time I need something, I always call her because she's still a part of my life. I mean, her job was threatened, and my perpetrator come to the school threatened her and her family, but she didn't back down. She continued fighting for me. She fought for me until I was able to exit out of his house. Now that is a powerful story. She is the one I praise. My trauma, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. She helped me through all that, step by step, even though she knows she has family. She put her life out for me, and she put her whole family online. And I was able to find the safety I need. I was able to exit out of that perpetrator's home from that trauma that abuse, that mental, physical abuse that he was putting into my life. The fear of government, the fear of working, all the things that he has brainwashed me with. This teacher from 6th grade told me all of those are just a lie, because I believed it all my life. All the 6 years I was with my perpetrator, I believed everything he told me, because that's all I know.
And then you had someone by your side.
I did, and that's all it takes. She was by my side, and she walked with me. She walked the walk with me all the way through, and she continues to do so. Yeah, so I praise you all, the teachers who are out there, who are doing everything you can. I know you don't get paid a lot, but trust me, save one life, and that's all you need. Just save one life. She did that. She reached out to me. I was one life that she saved. And to this day, I always honor her, and I always honor her and her family, her kids, because that is powerful to me. That's what it means to be a service provider. That's a true service right there.
She sounds like both a really special person and also a person that could be any one of us, right? Just a regular, ordinary person doing their job who saw somebody and said something and said, I'm here, I see you, I hear you, and you matter. And how can I help?
That's
powerful.
All.
Yeah.
All.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you. How about for you, Jamie?
So, echoing everything that was already said, I think on a more, I guess, long-term, I would say long-term, for me, what's been really helpful is, one, being in environments that have, the community has been really important to me. Coming from a place where isolation was seemingly the best thing to do or was forced upon you, and then also being put against the people around you, so that, that everybody was your competition. I think the healing aspect of friendship and sisterhood and brotherhood and community with people that have that unsaid shared experience, right? Like, we don't sit in support group and talk about our trauma. We talk about the healing, like we talk, because it doesn't matter. I have hundreds of survivor sisters and brothers. I probably know maybe a handful of their stories. And that's only because it came up organically, came up naturally, because the story doesn't matter. What matters is, like, I see you got through some shit, excuse my language, whatever. You guys only got one cuss word today. I usually cuss a lot. So, that's doing good for me. But you got through it, you're coming out and you're just trying to figure it out, right? Like you're just trying to figure it out. And I see you, I honor you, I value you. To sit in a room and not have to say a word and know that everybody is in there trying to navigate this healing journey, that has been really powerful for me. Also sitting in a room with people that have similar emotions, but all different experiences, learning from people like Patty and Kwame, and learning from providers who all have a story of themselves. We don't get into this work because we just, oh, this seems like a good idea. Like we get into it because we have a heart of empathy for the most part, right? And so we all have a story to what led us there. So community has been very important. So any provision or any providers that can offer that lived experience, community empowerment, support group, peer support. But also at the same time, the most empowerment I felt was when the first time that I got asked to come speak to do a training and not come and tell my story. For me, that was powerful because I had to start manipulating the system. Like I would agree to come and share my story. And once I got there, I'd be like, oh, psych, I'm actually going to teach you about this, because people didn't want me to come and do anything except share my trauma. And I'm like, no, you're not gonna, that's re-exploitation. I want to train on vulnerabilities. I want to train on empowerment to the exploiters' voices as well, because they have a story. I want to train on empathy. I want to train on all of these things that I have so much knowledge in, not because I learned them from a book, but because I had to walk through to get there and understand myself in order to understand the people that I wanted to help provide healing for. And so the first time that I stood in front of lawyers and doctors and the same officers that arrested me or raped me or whatever the case was within my experience, and I got to teach them about not what they did to me, but how I got through it anyways, and utilize that and turn that into an actual training and feel professionalized and feel, I don't know if professionalized is a word, feel professional, feel valued beyond my story, feel like I wasn't the all eyes on me because she's a survivor, and feel like I just fit in, but stood out at the same time. To me, that was empowering. And when I started getting paid a more than minimum wage, wage for my expertise, not my story, I started really shifting in my mindset of all the things that I could do. I could write books, I could create presentations, I can be a public speaker, I can be a motivational speaker, I can be a social media advocate, I can do all types of things that I was so limited in my own mind to. And the open door to be more than my story, and it sounds so cliche, but to be more than your story. And you don't have to have a super traumatizing story, but to be just you and to be able to be valued for that in all walks of life is powerful. And that opens these doors for limitlessness. And it opens the opportunity. Kwame's like, that's not a word. I'm like, oh, Kwame's a teacher. I know, but it's okay because we are limitless and we can do what we want. So, we get to be everything that everybody told us we don't get to be. And when you can do that and you can walk in that, man, that's some powerful stuff. To come back and take everything that was taken from you or that somebody took that said that you couldn't have, and you get it anyways. And you get to be humble about it and get compensated for it and create a living off of it. It makes all the things that were negative or that hurt us feel like they have value. And so for me, that was really powerful.
You speak the truth. That's correct. Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful.
Of course.
I want to take the opportunity to thank Framework for doing that for us, not for one moment during our meetings and conversations I ever felt not empowered. So thank you for honoring and respecting and having us here.
Well, that's the best feedback we can ever get. This is us handing you the mic. There's no way to fully articulate the appreciation that we have for you guys bringing your minds and your hearts to this conversation. I think you've put us all in touch with our own humanity, in addition to giving us a lot of new knowledge that we're going to be chewing on for a while. So Thank you, truly. We're gonna, there's more time. We're gonna shift to the Q&A from the attendees here today. I know that they've got a lot of questions for you. So folks, go ahead and put those questions in the Q&A if you haven't already. And I will turn it over to Charlie to share what some of those questions are.
Don't forget that if you see a question on the Q&A, the bottom of your screen that you really want to hear, upvote it. That way we will prioritize it and get to it first, but also know any questions we aren't able to get to, we will share with the speakers and then share that out with the event recording in the future. So first off, we have a question. For anti-trafficking programs that have no human trafficking survivors on staff and no things like board seats available, how can they push? How can they do more to encourage program decision makers to correct that gap?
That's a beautiful question that I've been asked that question before. In order for you to have a great organization and have something moving forward, you want to have a group of people, you want to encompass a different walk of life in your organization. You know, having that one survivor on your team will make a big difference, and when it comes to screening or just the intake form, all that you do, having that survivor connect with other survivors is huge. I long for somebody to talk to that have same experience as me for so long. Oh my goodness, it for me, it just feel like, oh my God, I need to connect somebody that I can talk to and understand me. And then when I finally find that person, I feel like it feels great. It just felt so good to know that, okay, I can share that experience with that same person and talk and laugh about it and then just look forward to the future. Yes, to encourage decision making, and you know, we just want to close those gaps. For survivors on your on certain, you know, on just create a job for them. You know, be able to be open-minded and part-time or full-time. Just have a survivor on your team. It will make a huge difference in everything you do. It will make a huge difference in your number and your turnouts and everything, that how you go about doing your service. It will make a huge difference.
I'm just going to be straight up that you're not going to have a successful program trying to serve a population that you don't have representation of that population making you the decisions or helping the decisions be made. It will absolutely fail. I promise. It might last, it might hold on for a little bit. You might be able to fake it for a little bit, but at the end of the day, if you're really trying to be the most impactful, you know, the survivor community talks. We know what resources are re-exploited and which ones aren't. We know which ones have inclusion and representation, and we know which ones don't. We know which ones value our voices and which ones don't. And we know which ones are open. Just because you don't have survivor representation or lived experience representation at the moment, as long as you're open to adapting and changing that, I think that you have the ability to progress forward. But at the end of the day, how can you, that's like having a restaurant and you don't have a cook. Like, how do you provide a service to a population that you don't have any lived experience feedback? You can learn all day from a book, and that is not to demean or minimize traditional education, but that is to say that you can't read lived experience on the other side. And so we have to have both. We have to have a team that values the voices of those that we are supporting, because if you don't, what that's saying is that you are demeaning that population that you know better because you read it out of a book or you learned it from somewhere, a third party or whatever, or you read a book by a survivor, but you're also devaluing the value of that survivor. You're good enough to come speak at our event and share your trauma, but you're not good enough to come and sit on our board. We don't have room for you on our board. We're sorry, but we have room to come and fundraise $50,000 based off of your story at our big gala every year. but we don't have enough services to provide for you. We don't have enough space to put you on salary. We don't have enough. And so it really devalues and minimizes, really debunks everything that you're trying to do within the community. And that's okay. If this isn't your lane, it's okay to go into another lane. Mm-hmm. Nobody's gonna lightning's not gonna strike you if this isn't really what's passionate on your heart. But this work you have to have a passion for it. You have to have a passion for not human trafficking. You have to have a passion for people, and you have to have a passion for people to be successful and to be to want to empower people instead of save people. And so as far as actual steps, if you are working with an organization that maybe just isn't there yet, what I would recommend is using your voice to empower a training by a lived experience expert. There are a ton of us out here providing educational trainings that all are 1099 contractors that can subcontract out, that this is this is how we make a living, a lot of us. So I would suggest to utilize some of those empowerment funds or some of those whatever funds are allocated to. I would suggest, hey, can we use $300 of that to pay a lived experience expert to come and train our staff on why it's important to have a lived experience voice on our staff or on our board, because that's going to open the door for people's minds to start jogging, like, oh, they're going to feel condemned because they're like, wait, we don't have a survivor on our board. We don't have a survivor on our staff. And so opening that door and utilizing, that's being a good advocate, using your voice in a place that you're already at, that you see like, oh, that's my organization. I need to step up. And if that doesn't happen after you utilize your voice, I think it would be time to move forward to an organization that does value your voice as well as the voice of those that you are trying to support in their transition. And that's okay, because there's a ton out here. And that one that you're with, if they're close to that, they're probably going to fail anyways. So you're good. You're going to be all right at the end of the day.
All right, so I think that you got a lot of tangible information on how you can move that forward. We'll be sharing out this recording. I think some clips might help motivate some of the decision makers in your area. And in addition to that framework, as well as our OVC training and technical assistant siblings do have funding, so that if you have something that your agency is developing or that has been there long lasting, your intake procedures, your hotline procedures, your exit and disciplinary procedures, anything that comes into contact with a survivor, we are available to connect you with a lived life expert and for you to get that feedback. So there are currently 99 people on the call. If we don't get 99 requests for something, I'm going to assume that you all already have survivor support at your agency. All right, so next up, we've got, can you suggest traits or things that have helped between handoff with case managers?
Patty, you look like you had something to say. Did you want to touch this?
Traits, you mean if you can provide the service, how to hand it off to someone else? Is that what I heard from this question?
Yeah, I wonder whether or not it could be because of they're not able to provide the service, or they are, you know, connecting to another agency that provides a different service. But in general, how can they make that that connection better, and what can they look for in their partners to ensure that when they hand off their client, that person will be received well?
That's a great question. So important. The handoff is very, very important because it can be very triggering, extremely triggering for survivors that's dealing with feelings of rejection and shame, and then you're handing them off without explanation sometimes, and they just feel rejected over and over again, which makes it much more complicated for them to get the services that they need. So I will reinforce what we all shared here to really partner with that survivor, know their needs, and contact the other survivor first and make sure that they can help the survivor that you're handing off before you send the survivor to them for them to do all the work themselves only to be rejected again. So just keeping in mind that rejection, that the emotional piece, again, we use that term again, trauma informed. uh it means that you're aware that the emotional, the psychological effects on being handed off and not being talked to. Why are you not able to help me? It really keep in mind that the survivor is not just of trafficking, but humans again. They don't understand the logic or the checklist behind providing services that you can't offer the service for some reason, then you send them off to someone. They don't understand all the background. All they hear is, you can't help me. They internalize, or can internalize, or I know I did, all the reason why you can't help me. And then you hand me off to somebody. That brings a lot of emotional issues to keep in mind. So I hope that helps. Just talk amongst the professionals first before you involve the survivor in having to deal with that handoff, and then include the survivor once you know that that service will be beneficial to them, and explain why. Talk them through the whole process, why you're handing them off. I found it the most helpful when people took the time to explain to me why they were doing what they were doing, and not just like, no, can't help it, no, not good enough, no, find someone else. Just take the time to explain it. It's not hard, in my opinion, but it can change everything for a survivor.
I think I agree, and I think also us reanalyzing our verbiage that we use. To me, warm handoff is a horrible term. I do not like that term at all. Handoff is like, gives me all those emotions of like, it's like a puppy that like you can't keep, and like, oh, we got to find you a new home, like let's figure out where you fit in. And so I think a big part of our advocacy too can be reanalyzing the verbiage that has come to be. That's not anybody's fault. That's just what it's come to be. And the way that we're going to be able to learn that is, once again, being inclusive and listening to those with lived experience. I'm like, what emotion does that evoke for you? Because it might not affect, Kwame, like to hear handoff. For me, I'm like, I don't like it. So, I think finding that neutral language is helpful first. And I think that what Patty said is very important. We don't understand in that moment of just trying to receive service. We don't understand all the intake boxes that you're filling out. We don't understand all the lines that we don't see that stuff for the most part. So all we hear and see is, oh, either you're not good enough, you got too many problems for us to help you, or we just don't want to help you. That's how our brains can process that. And so I think having those open dialogues and it not being like a closed door situation where like, okay, this means you can never talk to me again. Whereas it's more of like an open door policy, if policy allows that. And if policy doesn't allow that, I think that's another opportunity to reanalyze what our policies look like within our organizations. Can I have continued communication with this person if I'm not necessarily their case manager, but they are very attached to me? And how do I set those healthy boundaries? Because if I attach to you as a service provider and then you have to hand me off to another, I'm not going to receive that person the same way as I would you. And so I think what Patty said is very crucial, is helping us understand, like, this has nothing to do with me personally about what I want to help you with or not help you with. It's just that literally our program does not provide these services. So I really want to walk you through the steps to be able to guide you with someone that I trust, and not just calling a number and talking to someone like, oh, here's Susie on line 1. Like, let's see if you can help her out. Actually building rapport, not just with the survivor, with the other community partners, because now I can call Sarah directly and I'm like, hey, Sarah, like I have somebody who I think you could really help out, because I trust you and I know that you will take good care of this person's needs, and we just can't provide those. So I think building that relationship with the survivor or the person with lived experience, as well as other community partners, is really important, so that you're not just handing off people to who knows where, and they're into the abyss, and now they're back in a situation where they feel like, oh, nobody has my back, I might as well go back to someone who does, which is oftentimes our abusers, because they did have our backs for a long time. They did provide for us for a long time. And so how do I step in to fulfill those needs in a healthy way is going to be, and we can't provide those needs all the time. We can't provide every need, but I can not break that trust as I'm trying to help you build trust and learn relationships with other people, that it's okay to trust other people, not just me, right? So yeah, I pretty much just said what Patty said anyways, but whatever, I like to talk, so that's what you guys get.
I really have nothing else to share, because Patty and Jenny, you both mentioned all the stuff I wanted to share. You touch on the trust and that all that building that relationship, you talk about it. So that is really, it's a crucial part of our recovery too, is that building that trust. If you really trust somebody and then you hand off somebody else, you're gonna fully break that trust. So I mean, that's something I struggle with anyway. So I struggle with trust. So that's just me. So I don't want to be handed off to somebody else I don't know. So that's just that.
What a great amount of impact that it sounds like you can have as a provider with just a minute, just pausing a minute at the beginning or end of your connection with a client, and want to hand it off to the panelists for one last question. Feel free to keep adding them. They'll answer them in the follow-up. And we're also going to put our satisfaction survey in the chat. If you haven't been able to view that, it helps us a lot if you're able to just take a quick second, let us know, let the panelists know what you thought of this event. They really appreciate it. And in the chat section, you'll also find information on how you can engage with the panelists for future opportunities. So I am going to end it on this very fantastic question. What are ways that those with lived experience would like to engage with service organizations? They said that we would all appreciate recommendations for engagement. I imagine past the typical, please come share your story at our yearly fundraising event.
So I guess my suggestions would be to, once again, engage that person with lived experience in something that fits your organization's approach with their desires or their interests. So if somebody is super interested in graphic design, maybe you can get them involved in, they've never done it before in their life. Maybe you can advocate for them to link up with a graphic designer to get some training under their belt, and then maybe they can end up doing your social media marketing, and they can be involved in a way that they don't have anything to do with their trauma. That doesn't have anything to do with their lived experience. That's just something they're very interested in. That's also indirectly advocating for the work that your organization is doing. Maybe that person wants to do street outreach. Maybe that person wants to go in the community and maybe they want to share their story. That's okay too. Some people want to share their story. Maybe you can empower them by helping them integrate their story into an education, so that it's not just them pouring out their trauma, but it's them using their real life examples within their education, and that's empowering them to understand how to become a community educator. Maybe they want a mentor, maybe they want a peer support, maybe they want to sit on a board and feel like they get to dress up in a nice blazer at board meetings, and they get to go and their voice matters in those meetings, and that they're not always just getting like told, oh, okay, thank you for your suggestion, we'll think about it, but they actually see their advice and their experience put into play and practice through policy change, through program change. And maybe they want to be they want to help manage the house that you offer to those transitioning. Maybe they ask them what they want to do, and then see if that fits into anywhere in your organization, something that you're already doing. And if not, then maybe come up with a plan, sitting down with that person, getting to know, okay, we don't have that quite yet, but let's see how we can integrate that into our current programming to adapt it into further programming in the future. And let's see how we can rearrange. It's time to, you know, to revamp us anyway. So let's see how we can do that and be their voice. Sorry, no, don't be their voice. Be a partner with them in helping them empower their voice to be able to start shifting that change. Just ask them. It's okay to ask people, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to be called? How do you want me to identify you? It's okay to ask people that. And it's okay to listen. And it's also okay to say, hey, this isn't something that right now we can fit into our organization, but I do know a great organization that I can refer you to, that I have a great connection there that I think this would be perfect for, and help them start creating community and utilizing their transferable skills and networking and things like that. There's lots of ways to empower people and get involved with people with lived experience without having to focus on their lived experience.
All right, thank you so much. We will allow for the other panelists to have the opportunity to answer that question, to answer other questions as well. But in general, providing a space, being a microphone. And if you have questions on how to engage survivors, maybe you can start there. Pay someone to come in to review some of your items, conduct paid focus groups with past clients, all opportunities. We hope to see you at our upcoming events. Don't forget to complete the satisfaction survey, and thank you so much for showing up and for appreciating the panelists as much as we at Framework do. Thank you, panelists.